Good evening and welcome to Law Talk, the show that brings the law, the current events, and the Constitution into your living room each month. Mark, what are we covering tonight?
Well, Jim, I was thinking we start with sequestration.
Okay, sequestration. Isn't that originally when they had to raise the budget limit, and they had a big argument about that back in 2011, and then they decided that they were going to do a budget committee to see how we can resolve that problem.
Right.
What did they do?
It started some time ago, yeah, and I think that the president chose a committee, actually.
The president chose the budget committee, and
Right.
that was made up of both Republicans and Democrats,
Right.
I understand. And then what happened? What did the budget committee recommend?
Well, they actually came up with some cuts, that were kind of even-handed and, that neither side liked. Neither side was very happy with the solution, so that might have been a fairly good compromise.
Well, they did come up with some cuts, and I thought that
but they also came up with some taxes.
Yeah, in fact, what they tried to do was, from what I understand, was they made a lot of recommendations to the president and Congress on how they can control the debt.
Right.
Debt, and part of this was controlling the debt ceiling, so they didn't have to keep raising it, every quarter of the year. And what they actually came up with is a variety of suggestions they gave to the president and Congress, but then they also came up with something very special, which hadn't been done before, and that was the sequestration, which is the automatic meat cleaver cuts that would go across discretionary spending and the military if those budgetary suggestions weren't implemented. So what happened?
Well, things just kept getting a can kicked down the road until the day came when the sequestration came in. And what happened is apocalypse. It's basically the end of the world.
Apocalypse?
It's apocalypse.
Is this the end of the world?
It's the end of the world.
When did this actually kick in?
Just fairly recently. Just what is it? Was it March?
That was March 1st, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, March 1st. Well, actually, then you have another budget deadline on March 30th.
Well, that's the
31st,
debt ceiling argument
Yeah.
again.
So there's a couple of things coming. But this is apocalypse. It's Armageddon. It's the end of the world. And what the administration claims is that it's going to cost 100,000 teaching jobs, which is I'm kind of confused.
How does that work, Mark?
Because I didn't know
the federal government doesn't employ teachers.
Yeah, so I don't know how, if the federal government is employing teachers, it seems like it's a violation of states' rights, because
Correct.
if they were,
10th Amendment.
Because why would one state be paying for another state's teachers?
They would never be doing that.
So that seems kind of strange. So I'm a little confused about, but that is one of the part of the ends of the world, I guess. Okay, and the other thing is like 70,000 Head Starters don't get the Head Start.
Oh, you're talking about the program where children get their funding so they can go to preschools and things like that?
But I thought those are state programs.
Those
are
state programs.
So I don't understand. I don't
understand that one either.
I don't
Mark.
understand that one either. If that is happening, it shouldn't be. I mean, it'd be unconstitutional. 43 million for food stamp recipients. Now, I thought that was a state program as well.
Well, the interesting thing about food stamps is a reimbursable program through the federal government. But that should not be the main issue. The sequestration was, they called it the meat cleaver because it would go across all these various agencies that provided the most important aspects of life to those least able to take care of themselves. And I understand now when they talk about firemen and teachers and policemen and doctors, how could those people all be working for the federal government?
Well, yeah, they said 35 million local firefighters.
How can that be?
Are getting federal checks.
But wait a minute, I thought the cities each paid for their own firefighters, and the state had their own firefighters.
Well, that's
but it's not a federal. It's not a federal firefighter union.
Apparently, there's 35 million.
35 million.
35 million firefighters that are being paid by the federal government.
I've never heard of that before.
Anyway, that's the claim.
So, what other cuts were made?
Nutritional assistance to over 500,000 women.
Oh, that's terrible.
So those families are going to starve to death. And you know what it's all for?
What?
You have 100,000 teachers who somehow were being paid by the federal government. No, I've never heard of it. 70,000 Head Starters in a state program that are somehow were getting paid by the federal government. I guess the 43 million food stamps make sense. 35 million local firefighters who I've never heard of that one either.
Okay, well, wait a minute.
But you know what?
But who's making those selections?
Well, but who's it helping? Who's it helping to hurt all those people? It's the millionaires and billionaires, so they can have their yachts and corporate jets.
Oh, so they can have their Lear jets on the runway.
Yeah,
so
corporate
the
jets.
Teachers and the firefighters
and the
starving
babies. And
I also understand they cut the White House tours. Doesn't that affect every child that wants to visit Washington?
Well,
they all want to tour the White House. How does that have anything to do with this?
That's a political truism or something. Wait, political standard thing. When the government gets cut, they like shut down the Washington Monument. They're not going to shut down, conventions.
Well, they're talking about shutting down the federal forest, like Yosemite,
yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yellowstone. They're talking about cutting all that
Well, what's
back.
the first thing they'll do is shut down the airlines, and they'll shut down the what people use. The things that people don't want, they're not going to shut it down.
Well, wait a minute. I've heard a lot of talk about mechanical squirrels. I don't know, where they do dolphin experiments to see if they'll swim together, if they're in a pack or whatever.
So you'd rather have a corporate jet than have a dolphin swim?
Well, no. What I'd rather have is a responsible government that decides to make cuts that are truly based on fraud or abuse or waste. I prefer to have the cuts come in areas where there's a great bulk of extra spending.
But the administration refused to do that, because what the administration said is that it wouldn't be fair for them to have to decide where the cuts go. So the Congress wanted the executive branch to have the power to decide where the cuts went.
Yeah.
And the executive branch said, no, we don't want that choice.
Whoa. I thought the executive branch would want that discretionary choice so they can make the cuts where they're most likely to affect the least amount of people.
Well, what some people say, well, that's like asking me, which hand do you want me to cut off, right?
No, that doesn't make any sense, because $85 billion, which is the sequester amount, is actually only 2.5% of the total budget when we're talking a $1.4 trillion budget. How can 2.5% have that much a dramatic effect on all these major parts of the government spending packages?
Well, I think, for one thing, I guess the discretionary, I guess you'd consider the military part of the discretionary.
No, although they lumped it together with discretionary.
They lumped the military.
But military is actually the Constitution, and our country was set up, and as military is one of the main functions of the federal government, to protect our country from other countries.
In the constitutional republic that used to be, but not so much nowadays. But the 2.5% reduction is a reduction in increases. I mean, we've actually had, budgets go up every year, and the budget's going up 4%. You knock it back 2.5%. It's still going up 1.5%. I mean, the federal budget is still going to be bigger this year than last year, even with the 2.5.
So what you're talking about is this sequester is not exactly cutting back
None of this
to
stuff
like
is ever
going back to 208 or 209.
No.
It's actually just cutting back the rate of increase for the next spending fiscal year.
It's not cutting anything whatsoever.
It's slowing the rate of increase.
It's just not increasing as much as they wanted.
Well, I don't know.
They went out and paid good money for these votes, and they expect to have.
They expect those votes to be paid.
They expect to get those taxes.
Yeah, but I have a question, Mark. You and I run a budget in your home and your business.
Right.
So how is it that we can find places to cut in small enterprise, in your home, and balance our budgets because we have to?
Because we can't
print money. But the federal government just can't do it.
We can't print money.
Well, no. Well, is it the printing the money or is it borrowing the money?
Well, it's both. Both. We're doing quite a bit of both.
Well, unfortunately, how are we going to bring this under control? What's your theory, Mark?
We got quantitative easing 3, which I forget how many, $250 billion a month. We got the 40 or 50 cents out of every dollar is borrowed. So, I mean,
actually, it's 43 cents.
43 cents.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's right now? Okay, each citizen. I'm talking about each citizen, not people who definitely can
pay.
Walk. No, but people, not necessarily people, but every living citizen, right? In the United States is $53,000 in debt, each of them, right?
Well, that's because if each citizen is responsible for paying their fair share of the national debt, it would be $53,000.
Okay, and that's about, because a lot of those folks aren't working. That's 190% per capita.
Well, I got to tell you, so Mark, how were we going with all this?
Well, we're about 35% over Greece as far as in debt.
All right. Well, now Greece. When you compare Greece to America, there's two different things. Greece had no real capital coming in the same level of the U.S., but are you saying that our spending versus income is now dropping to a point similar to Greece?
Not dropping at all. Our debt exceeds the Greeks. The American citizens' debt exceeds the Greek citizen debt by 35%.
Oh, well, geez. This sounds like a new subject we don't want to get into right now, but what's our second subject for tonight, Mark?
Okay, so... well, as part of the sequester, but as maybe more of a political maneuver, the administration decided to release detainees.
Wait a minute. You're talking about those illegal detainees that are felons or whatever level of crime that are being held by the Department of Homeland Security, aren't they? Isn't that what you're talking about?
The Department of Homeland Security released about 5,000 detainees claiming, well, we may have some budget cuts in the future. And so if there were such budget cuts, we probably should have released them now in case we wouldn't have room to put them
Wait a minute,
there
time out, Mark.
later.
Wait a minute, there's a lot of maybes in all of that. So what you're saying is, as a result of the
And
sequester,
we probably have to release another 3,000 because if maybe there's a cut and we don't have enough room sometime, we may not have room then, so now we should let them go.
So what's happening is you're saying Janet Napolitano, who is the head of Department of Homeland Security, is stating that we might get a cut because of sequester.
And that might affect
and
our ability.
might affect the ability to
hold
these 5,000 or more. But my understanding of the holding versus release, that it actually costs more to monitor those criminal illegal aliens that are released than it actually costs to keep them incarcerated. How do they justify that? I don't understand.
Well, they may have just let them go with no monitoring. Who knows?
Okay, they let them go with no
basically
monitoring.
an
What are you
amnesty.
saying? It's like another amnesty.
It may just be an amnesty.
Is this another DREAM Act for criminals?
Yeah, it may be a DREAM Act. But yeah, what it was is an executive fiat, right? And, they're saying that, they have a certain interest in, this group is...
Wait a minute, who has a certain interest? In which group?
The people who believe in social justice want people who vote, the right way, and people who vote the right way don't believe there should be open borders.
Wait a minute, I have a question. Are you trying to tell me the illegal aliens that are felons or other criminal illegal aliens are actually being released and then they're given the right to vote? Is that what you're telling me?
Well, what I'm saying is, actually, American citizens, from these folks' viewpoint, this is Azatlan, and the Americans are actually illegal aliens.
Wait a minute. Azatlan, just for the viewers that don't understand that, is a belief in a strong belief out of Mexico and in California, held by people with cultural backgrounds from Mexico, saying that California, Arizona, and Nevada actually belong to Texas belonged actually to Mexico.
Oh yeah,
and then as a result, they believe Azatlan is another empire that they want back.
Well, basically the same way that Palestinians believe that they live in occupied territory. People in Azatlan, or the United States, occupy this territory through terrorism, discrimination, exploitation, all that.
Remember the Alamo.
Yeah, all that.
All that.
So anyway, so that's basically, so basically they're not really letting illegal detainees go. They're just like letting people go who ought to go.
But wait a minute. See, my understanding is it's one thing to be able to receive amnesty because you're an honest citizen, you're working hard, and you came across the border, and you're just somebody that's an undocumented traveler. But what about the people that are committing felonies? Severe felonies and being held by Department of Homeland Security, and those people are being released. Nobody wants those people released.
I think that they argue that these were low-level offenders.
Low-level offenders.
Yeah.
Well, I understand Arizona is the main drop ground for these people, and in Arizona, they've done an analysis of the people being released. And first of all, it's very difficult to find out the crime level of the people being released, but they were able to find out. And they found that the majority of the people being released under this Department of Homeland Security order by Janet Napolitano, who claimed she didn't know anything, were actually serious felons, and that's why they were still being held as opposed to being released and expected to come back to court. So I'm a little concerned about, I don't see those same people being released in Chicago, where some of the administration originates. And I don't see those people being released in San Francisco, where other people, and I don't see them being released in Las Vegas, where Harry Reid comes from. So why are they being released in Arizona? What's the theory on that?
Well, it's probably the weather is better there.
Oh, it's weather.
And they can, it's easier for them to take care of themselves once they get up.
Oh, okay.
Probably has nothing to do with.
It's a nicer climate.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with Governor.
It does. Oh, it has nothing to do with any of the politics. It's just, but if they want them to vote, wouldn't it make more sense to...
Who's the governor there?
Where?
In Arizona?
Jan Brewer.
Oh, yeah, Jan. It's got nothing to do with Jan
it
Brewer.
has nothing to do with Jan Brewer, who actually yelled at the president on the news. I don't think it would have anything to do with her.
This might be considered, from a constitutional issue, this might be considered overreach or an executive fiat, a lot like the National Labor Relations Board thing we talked about last time, a lot like Fast and Furious, kind of executive overreach.
I mean, and like Benghazi we talked about as well.
Yeah, kind of selective enforcement. So this, from a constitutional issue, the executive branch is kind of doing things by fiat. They've got some excuses, but they seem rather transparent. Now, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, maybe, like I said, maybe these detainees ought to be released. I don't know. But legally, they're not supposed to be unless they go through a process.
My understanding of the federal courts here in San Jose, I know the federal courts, and I watch the various criminals that come through while I'm attending the federal courts for one reason or another. But I do see those people are held, even for misdemeanors. So I'm not clear why allegedly felons are being released by Janet Napolitano. My belief was that there was marching orders put through from the very top to each of the department heads to say, make pain obvious so the citizens can see what sequester was or is. And I think Janet Napolitano, who's a loyal marching soldier for the administration, believed that it was her duty to let's release 5,000, 10,000 criminal illegals, and we don't know which country they're from, but we're going to release these people because there's going to be a shock value to the news. Do you think that had anything to do with it?
I guess that's possible, but it also might be that they think that these people ought to be released anyway.
Maybe they should be part of the DREAM Act. Are they all under 30?
Yeah, maybe maybe they should be part of an open border.
Were they all brought here against their will?
I don't know.
We don't know the stats on that, do we?
So the intention but obviously the intention is they want to release these folks, and this is a artifact or an excuse they can use to do it.
Well, I have a question. How are they monitoring them to make sure they're not out committing more crime?
I'm not sure there's any monitoring at all.
Well, is that because there's this question now you can't even monitor the people you're releasing that are potentially felons with criminal illegal aliens? I'm not clear how that works hand in hand.
Well, it might be hard to monitor them if you don't, you're not sure who they are or what their paperwork is, or that kind
But
of
if
thing.
sequester it has such severe cuts, and the Department of Homeland Security was actually receiving those cuts, why would it be cheaper for them to release when it's cheaper for them to keep in incarceration?
Well, not if they just let them run loose. If they cut them loose. They cut them loose.
All right. On that happy note,
that is the local sheriff has to handle.
All right. Well, on that happy note of letting them loose because they need to run free, born free, run free.
Run free.
I think we should move on to our third subject. What are we looking at tonight, Mark? On our third subject?
Cell phone subsidies.
Wait a minute. Are you talking about life assistance?
Yeah, life assistance, and apparently 41% or 6 million of the recipients were ineligible for the $2.2 billion program. Now, this program, 4 years ago, was like $800 million. Now it's $2.2 billion.
That seems like a big increase.
A big increase, but then when you look at it, 41% of them, when they looked at it, shouldn't be having it. So it seems like most of the increase that's happened
is illegal use.
Was, ineligible.
Unauthorized.
Ineligible.
Well, Mark, in preparation for the show tonight, I actually went on to the website that provides life assistant applications.
Right.
And remarkably enough, James Barrett, that, I would like to think that I'm not in dire need of a free cell phone. I could sign up for a cell phone and get a cell phone, and then they mail you a cell phone. And there's absolutely no really check to see, do you need one? Do you qualify for one? And it's effectively, they give you a cell phone, they give you minutes, and then they give you discretionary minutes you can buy for lesser costs than any normal people can buy minutes. I find the whole program kind of odd.
Well, they did a little bit of investigating on it, some of the state agencies, and they said, looked like people were signing up multiple times. Mm-hmm. So people were getting more than one. People were getting more than one.
If you want to sell your phone, you can sign up more than once.
I wouldn't call it selling, probably sharing.
Oh, sharing.
They're sharing. Okay. And they also looked at it, and they thought some of these cell phone companies, the amount of people they were signing up, they said it's mathematically impossible to sign up so many people so quickly. You just can't do it. But they had some pretty ingenious ways of signing people up. First of all, they would sell them, unsolicited phones, they just mail them out.
Well, that's the whole point, because here's the thing. But here's the question. If these are homeless and people that don't have anywhere to live, where are they mailing these cell phones to?
Well, the people,
do we have any way to track where they're going?
Well, they did track some of them. A lot of them, they would go to hospital rooms, sign people up in hospital rooms that needed a phone. They just mail them out to a whole bunch of people.
I understand they mail some to prisons.
I don't know about that.
And you're not even allowed to have a phone in a prison. Why would a phone go to Sing Sing? Why would a phone go to San Quentin? Why would a phone go to Alcatraz that was open? I don't understand any
Well,
of that.
I mean, on the other hand, it's really hard to get a payphone nowadays. There's no payphones.
Well, they took all those out.
Yeah, so
because they couldn't tap them.
And it does make sense that you want to have a cell phone. I mean, and it would be hard for people to get along in the modern world without a cell phone. And you got to admit that.
It would be very difficult.
You got to admit that.
But see, you know what? Are they using these cell phones? Is there any mandate that you have to use a cell phone to get a job, to be able to seek employment, not receive welfare, not receive food stamps? Is there any quid pro quo where you're supposed to be able to get a cell phone to help yourself rise above your station in life? Is that part of the deal?
No, there's no deal. But the thing is, they're just handing out the cell phone.
Who's paying for this?
Well, the $2.2 billion program is coming out of the, which is interesting because we're talking about the $85 billion sequester, and this is basically, whatever, 40th of that sequester is the $2.2 billion. Turns out half of it's all fraud.
And if half of it's fraud, there's $1 billion right up the top. And then we don't have to close the White House to the children that want to tour the White House during their summer vacations, right?
Right. And then you still wouldn't be able to hire back the teachers and the firefighters that didn't work for you.
That
didn't work for you in the first place. But
I don't understand that.
That's kind of tricky.
But let's go back to the cell phones, because the cell phone fraud, I understand, is approaching 50% of the program generally.
41%.
But
6 million.
I know the program must be helping some people. Does it help the seniors?
Well, I think it's good that they do provide cell phones to people, because it's really hard to get along without one now.
I understand
and also,
that. But
landline,
is there a balance? Do you look at the income of the individuals that get those cell phones to determine whether or not that person should even have a free cell phone?
Well, most of the people that dropped out, they didn't respond to the survey.
Oh, the survey.
The survey.
Are you telling me there was a survey that asked you whether or not you really need a free cell phone?
Yeah, well, you would get the phone, and then they, at a certain point, they said, why are you really eligible? So they did not respond to the eligibility checks.
Oh, well,
that's when they got.
But see, they didn't have time.
They
didn't have time because they were too busy worried about, did they get their EBT card for their food stamps, or did they get the free extra minutes for the cell phone? I have a lot of bit of caution that I'd like to pose for this life assistance program. I think there needs to be a little more investigation of the fraud.
Comes to, the users pay about $10 a month. That's quite a bit.
Where's that money coming from?
Well, that's part of the 2.2 billion.
Is that part of the grant? You get $10 a month to pay for the free cell phone?
Yeah, the phone pays for itself. They don't give you the money and then you.
How's the phone pay for itself?
I mean, you've got the phone and it just works.
Well, I understand.
No. I guess they do pay. They do pay about $10 a month, but it's subsidized.
It's subsidized. Is it like $8 gets paid by your local county?
Well, maybe what you pay for $10 might be worth $50 or $60 to most other folks.
I see. But who pays for the minutes?
Well, I would say it's a subsidized payment. So,
well, if I put my iPhone on there, would I get my $10 a month for free to pay for my whole iPhone?
I don't see why not.
Why not? What kind of phones do they give? Do they give them Droids, Android? Do they give them iPhones?
I think they're basic phones.
A basic phone. What's a basic phone now? Does it take pictures?
Oh, all phones take pictures.
They all take pictures.
Yeah. They all
do they text?
I'm sure they all text.
They all text. And they get free minutes. So I got a question. Couldn't they go out and start their own business with this?
I don't know but the thing is, they may not get Game Boy.
Oh, they might not have the games.
Yeah, you might have a thing.
But what do you do in your free time?
Yeah, so that's the thing. That's probably the biggest travesty of this whole thing.
The travesty is they don't get free games.
They don't get
Minecraft.
They don't get
Minecraft.
No accessories.
No Pop Tropica.
No apps. Nothing.
No apps.
So that's something they got to look at.
No Raz Kids.
And probably if they gave them all apps and everything, and they paid for the apps, you could take this $2.2 billion program and run it up to 50 or 100 billion.
Well, wait a minute. That means if I want to develop a new app just for the homeless with a cell phone, that would actually be a profitable venture then.
Yeah, right.
Especially if that many people are getting free cell phones.
Well, if 41% is 6 million, then the total is probably 14 million.
Did you get a new free cell phone through Life Assistance?
No, I didn't. But
Did you apply?
But for 14 million people are getting them, and so that's just going to go up. So it's and then when they said, well, why wasn't this a little more regulated? How did this happen? They said, well, we're still using landline technology.
Landline technology. I don't know about that, Mark.
To check for eligibility.
I don't know if you noticed as you walk down the street these days, you got to look out for the people texting and bumping and grinding and looking for their apps and their videos. And I got to tell you, it's a total circus out there with people with their cell phones. And now the phones are going to get bigger, and pretty soon you can watch movies as you're walking along. I want to text in between this scene, and I'll text over here, and
you can already watch movies.
I know. But I'm talking about, do you get to do that on the life assistance cell phone?
Well, I think it's discrimination if you don't.
I think, you know what? Yeah. I think it's discrimination if you don't get big screen TV. You don't have your Porsche on the driveway, and if you don't get that Learjet, you get to fly at least once a year for your family to Hawaii. Where is that program?
That's coming. I'm sure it's coming.
Coming. What are they going to call that one?
I'm sure that's on
vacation assistance? It could be. But let's go back to life assistance for a minute. I understand the major cell phone company that's producing this is the richest person in Mexico, who's actually one of a top bundler and good friend of the president, who's actually has the largest contract on this. He has almost 50% of this contract.
Yeah,
so
I don't know
how does that
that
play into this?
I didn't read that.
You didn't read that part?
I didn't read that part.
Oh,
no,
you didn't read that part.
But there are 4 or 5 different companies that are into this pretty heavily, and they're having a little trouble. Some of them explaining.
So who's paying them to provide the free cell phone?
Well, it's all paid by the federal government.
All paid by the federal government. Who is providing the money for the federal government?
It's the government's
It's
money.
out of nowhere.
No, it's the government's
money. Government earns the money, right?
No, the government owns everything.
Oh, they own everything.
And then sometimes people are silly enough to think that when they create wealth, that they've earned stuff. But that's just an illusion.
Wait a minute. Are we living in a fiefdom?
Because that's
Is it a fiefdom right now?
Yeah, it's
Am I in the Shire?
Because you can't earn what can never be yours. The government owns everything.
That's right. I forgot.
There's no private property.
I did forget that.
Yeah, you forgot about that.
In fact, that's the new government.
That's just the way it is.
But anyway, let's go back to the cell phones. Why should people get free cell phones? I don't understand. This question has not been answered. Why do people get free cell phones?
Because they're needy.
They're needy of what?
They're needy of cell phones.
They got to be texting?
Well, I'm saying they're generally people who are on, food stamp subsistence or assistance, which aren't really food stamps anymore. Now it's a credit card or an
It's a debit card. Yeah, you don't want to be embarrassed. Heaven forbid you use food stamps in an old food stamp method.
Yeah, so they don't have that.
Now it's a debit card.
So that was supposed to be equated by that, but when they just started sending them out unsolicited,
okay, wait a minute.
They weren't checking for anything.
We're not done with this yet because the cell phone issue is very important to me. Why do people need cell phones that don't have a job? Is it about they need to communicate anyway? I can get that part, but where does it go from there?
What if they have a sick family member they have to call?
All right, well, I'll tell you, on a sick family member, I hate to run away on a sick family member, but I think it's where we have to run away tonight. And I got to tell you, I really appreciate coming to our table so we could share some information with you tonight on Law Talk.
Well,